Yeah.
One area that they did pivot in, obviously moving on from the Mac Jones era, I think we can officially say that draft pick, was essentially a failure. Um,
Yeah.
we had a really fun like pre-draft recording mock draft episode that we did right before we first started this. Like the first thing we ever did was like a mock draft thing right
Yeah.
before the draft a couple months ago. And you laid out this amazing plan that you thought New England should do to like build their roster. You remember that?
Yeah,
And
I do.
I told you I think that is a great plan. I think that they should hire you to be their GM, but I promise you right now that Bob Kraft will absolutely not let that happen. They will
Yeah.
take a quarterback at 2 or 3,
Yeah.
excuse me, and that's exactly what they did. Drake May is a New England Patriot. Personally, I think it does provide some hope to the fan base, which is exactly why I think Mr. Kraft made that decision. And he's got all the measurables, right? Like this is a guy who's got the size, he's got mobility, he's got the strength, definitely has NFL arm talent. Where are you on the New England Patriots quarterback situation as it stands today, going into next year?
I mean, it again. It goes back to nepotism. You didn't bring in a new GM. You let Elliott Wolf take over, who was a guy who worked underneath Bill Belichick for the last however many years. I think it's like 4 or 5 years. He's worked directly under him in the GM department, and Bill Belichick was a bad GM. So how good could Elliott Wolf be, right? I mean, maybe he could surprise us, but if if you're learning from a guy like Bill Belichick, who is notorious for being just a terrible GM, especially on the offensive side of the ball, especially in the last 5 to 6 years, I have no hope. I mean, to for anybody who's curious, my plan with the New England Patriots was the best strategy was to trade out of 3, particularly with Minnesota. You knew that Minnesota loved Drake May, right? Let Minnesota jump up, come get Drake May, and you knew that's the thing. Like if you're a dog GM, if you like really have that dog in you, you know that they want this guy, right? So you go, okay, I see that you have pick 11 and I see you have pick 23. I need those 2 off rip. Really, I need your next year's first round pick, and then probably like the year after too. Maybe 26 if we'll let you have one in there between. Like you have to get something from that. So you could walk away with potentially 3 to 4 first round picks, but instead you stayed put and you took a guy who, I know I know there's been people who's made the argument that he's better than Caleb. He was actually the number 1, or, in a year without Caleb, he's definitely the number 1. But the reality is 2 teams passed on him fully, and you ended up with the 3rd guy. And only time will tell if that was the right choice or not. But the problem I have is that, okay, you could have drafted your franchise left tackle at 11. You could have drafted another, an edge to pair with Christian Barmore for the next decade on that D line, and then you could have taken your quarterback next year. Because spoiler alert, you're going to be bad next year. So you have your own pick still. So that's probably going to be a top 2 to 3 pick, if not number 1. And then you would have had, whatever Minnesota ends up doing, which if you look at their division, if they rolled Drake May into that, like, I don't know, like I don't see a rookie quarterback winning that division or even coming in second, frankly. It was probably still a 4th place spot. So you're probably picking, in the top 3 and then in the top 20, no matter what. So then you would have had your left tackle, your edge, your quarterback, and then maybe a high-end receiver or something like that. I mean, it's all coulda, shoulda, woulda at this point, but my problem is that it was really there. It was there on the table for you, and you decided to not do it. You decided to go get Drake May, but the problem is that you don't have any pieces around Drake May. I think it's a bit of revisionist history sitting here saying that Mac Jones was terrible. I watched Mac Jones be good 2 years ago because he had pieces around him. Like, granted, it was not good last year and it was not good the year before, but again, you have not put pieces around him. Who's been the receiving core? Who's been the O-line? Who's been the running backs? The dead body of Ezekiel Elliott and Ramondre Stevenson? Like, come on, guys. That's not setting up your 20 whatever 3-4 year old quarterback for success. So what you have to do this year is you have to put out Jacoby Brissett. There's no way in hell you can play Drake May before week 8. There's no way in hell you can do it. I'm sorry, you can't do it. What are your pieces here? Who is his security blanket? This kid, just like you said, bro. It's like, he's got all these things to him, but how can I roll him out there and be throwing the ball to who?
Not yet.
KJ Osborne
You can't. Not yet.
Polk? I
Yeah.
mean, it's ridiculous. I don't know. I don't want to like poo-poo on the Drake Maye. This is less about Drake Maye. It is more about what was potentially on the table for you as a franchise, right? Drake Maye could be special. I'm not sitting here saying that Drake Maye doesn't have special to him. Just like you said. I mean, 6'4", 245 pounds. I mean, a rocket of an arm. Not scared to throw into tight windows. He's got special about him. But the problem with Drake Maye, much like what I've said in the Chargers video about Justin Herbert, he doesn't have that like kind of that elite touch and that elite feel for the pocket. He just doesn't. And so, are you able to mold that into him? Definitely. It's absolutely possible. The problem is that you can't throw him to the fire in the first 8 weeks. You have to let Jacoby Brissett do that. And Jacoby's he's been a good bridge guy. That's not the worst situation to be in, like quarterback wise. Jacoby's a solid vet. And again, no hate to Jacoby, but who are you throwing the ball to? Because seemingly it's you and me. But again, Maye coming from like the ACC, the North Carolina, like I don't love the draft history there. I don't love like, are you going to be Deshaun Watson or are you going to be Mitch Trubisky? Like, are you going to be Trevor Lawrence or are you going to be Daniel Jones? Like, I don't know. I mean, I would much rather, and none of those guys are really like world beaters. They're not like the highest of the high level, but if you can end up being Trevor Lawrence, I mean, hell, that's great. I think Trevor has a really bright future, but as we saw with Deshaun, I mean, he had all these stats and all this ability, but he couldn't win shit. And then Daniel Jones and Mitch Trubisky were busts. So I don't know. You're not taking like an SEC kid or you're not taking a Big Ten kid. You're taking an ACC kid. I think that's always a risk. And then when you add the context of, oh my God, all that was on the table, I could have gotten at the very least 3 first-round picks, and I'm still going to be bad next year. I'm still going to be bad. So I might as well kick the can down the road for one more year, let Minnesota come get their quarterback, deal with that, grab these core pieces to my team, and then move forward and see where that gets me. But you didn't do that. You did what Robert Kraft wanted you to do, which was, take a quarterback at 3, and because we're always going to be chasing Brady, and it's just, I just don't like it. I don't like it for them. I think it's going to be a rough, I mean, I go as far as saying like a rough 5 years. I don't want to like put my name out there and say rough decade, but like it's not looking great. Your defense is older. Your offense is non-existent. Your quarterback is 21, and you brought in a defensive head coach who is a Belichick disciple. Like this is gonna take a long time. You're gonna be at the bottom of the AFC East for a minute now. And that's really what I have on it, man. I don't know. I mean, I'll let you cook on the pieces because I don't think there are any.
Yeah. Well, I mean, touching on the Drake Maye pick briefly before we kind of segue into the rest of this this offensive unit and, these skill players, I think the good news to sort of counter what you're saying is that I think they will be picking very high again next season. So you will have an opportunity now that you've taken what you believe to be, because at the end of the day, it's all about what the front office believes. If they believe that this is their next guy, then that's what they believe. So
sure,
what they're going to do is probably be bad this year, and they'll be able to do kind of what you just laid out this following season, and kind of build the war chest around Drake Maye, so to speak, which is their plan. And that's
if you
really
do
all
that,
they
then
can
all's
do.
Forgiven.
Yeah, and but again, I mean, it all comes down to whether or not Drake Maye is a hit, which in the NFL with a lot of these rebuilds, that is what it comes down to. And I think the Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert comp is great. To me, that is kind of what he represents, from a physical standpoint, is those two type of guys. But he is raw, so we'll see. I'm with you. I don't think that he should even play this season, honestly, and I hope we don't see him down the stretch, because their first 8 to 9 games are brutal. And you might start off 1-7, and I'm serious about that.